how to present it to your supervisor, and the things that happen along the way, which might be of interest to you or which might be of common problems as well to our students. All right. So the learning objectives of this session are that by the end of this session, participants will be able to appreciate the steps in the process of proposal writing. They will be able to devise a personal plan for making a research proposal. And hopefully, if we have time, we will develop a small research proposal and appraise it in the session. However, we will see this might go on being optional depending on the time we spend on discussion and on other things. I look very avidly into the chat box also. So if you have any comments, anything, I will be reviewing the chat box alongside. So please don't hesitate in putting anything over there. If you want to talk, kindly just raise your hand so that either the moderator or I can see and we can arrange for that also. Okay. Thank you. Let's move ahead. So before you start any sort of research, the first thing that you have to understand is that you have to ask the right questions. So a proposal is basically a write-up, or it is a setting you are giving somebody and you're telling them that this is what I want to do. This is what I intend to do in my study, in my work. So for that, you have to ask the right questions. There are three questions which you always need to address: what, why, and how. So the first is going to be, what is your question? What is your research question? What is the purpose of this study? What do you intend to do? Why is going to firstly reflect, why is your study important? Why do you think this is something which people will be interested in? Why do you think people will buy this research? And how shows you the structuring and how you are going to perform this research. All right, so that focuses on your methodology. So before planning any research proposal, any research activity, keep these three things in mind. What is your question? Why is it important? And how are you going to do it? Now, when you propose, whether it is a marriage proposal or a research proposal, there are four things that you need to understand. The proposal has to be heartfelt. It has to be well planned. It has to be practical and well executed. And you need to know that this is the one person for you, or this is the one research that you will be capable of doing. So heartfelt basically means that you have to have a sense of connection with that person or with that body of work. You cannot just go ahead and do a research because it is something that your supervisor feels strongly about, or it is something that is the fashion these days. For example, if you are a master's in public health student, you will be compelled to do a research on COVID or its effects on public health right now because that is in vogue. However, think about your strengths and your weaknesses and then judge whether this is something you should be doing or not. It has to be heartfelt because research is a long process. It is a tedious process. It takes a lot of your energy. It takes a lot of your time. So until and unless you have a connection with it, like marriage, unless and until you have an emotional attachment with it, it's not going to work out. So you have to have some sort of connection there. You have to have some sort of recognition of your strengths and you have to play on those. Secondly, it has to be well planned. You have to be very practical. You have to understand that you have some limitations. You have to understand that you have to plan each and every small step. We will discuss planning in more detail in slides ahead also. You have to make it well executed and practical. So if you want to propose, you would choose the ideal location, you would choose the ideal ambience, you would obviously choose the ideal dialogues. Similarly, in your research proposal, you have to choose the ideal setting, you have to choose the ideal methodology, you have to choose the ideal chemicals. If you are doing a physiology research, you have to choose the ideal patient, you have to choose the ideal control. So you have to understand that it has to be very practical and well executed. If you start doing a research which is very ambitious, which is on a topic, for example, you start doing something on novel gene therapies in physiology, you will not find the technology in most areas of Pakistan to continue with that. So that may be a very beautiful proposal, but it is not going to be practical. It is not going to be something which you will be able to execute. So you have to keep it in mind that it has to be heartfelt plan, but it has to be practical. It's not going to be something which you will just base on a whim. Okay, and you need to be sure this is the one. So you need to be sure this is the proposal that you can carry out. That's not going to happen all of a sudden. You're going to have to go through a lot of topics, going to have to sieve through a lot of questions, and only then will you be able to understand that this is the proposal I want to continue with, or this is the research I want to pursue ahead. Okay, so the first thing that you have in your research proposal is going to be an introduction. So introduce yourself with your title. Okay, your title is going to be the first point or the first thing somebody sees in your proposal. It is your unique selling point. It is your attention grabber. So you have to choose a very pertinent title. The title must address the question at hand. It should be brief. It should not be very tedious, very hard to understand. If you are doing a research in public health, if you are doing a research in medical education, if you are doing a research in a more qualitative setup, it is now advisable that your title should also be very catchy. So it should be something which not only makes the audience understand what it is about, but it should make them feel involved. It should be an attention grabber. Okay, it should be like the titles of advertisements. So you have to make it in such a way that everybody understands that your apple is the red one and they pick it in a bunch of other researches also. So for example, I'd like to give you a title I did in a research last year. I won a research award for, and it was research related to professional identity formation in medical students. So the title I gave it was Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, Am I an Optometrist? Is That All? Exploring Professional Identity Development in Optometry Students. So it had a fun component to it, and it also had a reflective component about what is going to be in the title. So that's why I think it was one of the things where I got more points about the fact that it was catchy. However, as it was a more qualitative aspect, was a research related to medical education, the title is slightly longer. In researches related to health sciences and particularly clinical sciences, we prefer more crisp, short, and to the point titles. So keep that in mind. Keep your audience in mind, keep your study in mind, but introduce yourself with your title. Second most important thing that you're going to come across on a research proposal is the abstract. So there's a saying that the first impression is the last impression. The abstract is the first part of your proposal. All right, it's going to be the first thing after the title. You're going to put your abstract. Those can be structured. Structured means that they can have material and methods separately, they can have a background separately, they can have a results column separately, or they can be unstructured, which means that it can be in the form of a paragraph. So the abstract is a summary, or it's a bird's eye view of your research. Most people who give grants, most grant giving bodies, most supervisors, most people who will be in research boards and committees reviewing your work, if they don't think the abstract is satisfactory, they will not move to the next page. So make sure that you have a perfect abstract. The rule of the thumb for the abstract is that it is the first part of your proposal, but write it at the last. So complete your research proposal so you can see all the errors and all the problems and all the good things in it, and make your abstract or your summary of the proposal at the very end. Now, these are some of the ways in which we can write. This is basically more pertinent to serious health science research of clinical or lab work. So these are some of the ways which you can write things in your abstract. You can stress on the importance of a particular matter. You can stress on your outstanding problems in a particular field and then give your hypothesis. You can stress on background and preliminary data. You can give your experimental approaches. You can give the significance of your study. You can give summary answers, or you can combine all of these together and make a small paragraph. This is up to you. The way you think that you can present your work much better, you can take it to that side. Now, research is an iterative process. It is something in which you have to be very, very astute. You have to think about everything properly. So you have to be like a detective. So at every point, keep in mind, what would Sherlock do? So when you are writing your introduction, keep in mind that at every sentence, you should have a question as to, is this logical? Is the pattern of the sentence fine? Is it grammatically sound? Is it methodologically sound? Is it a statement which can be referenced? Is it something which is plausible? For example, if you write something which is a very sweeping statement, like many people in Pakistan, millions of people in Pakistan have been affected by the COVID-19 virus. That is a very sweeping statement. It is not a fact. It is not something which you can corroborate in numbers. It is not something which is going to get you a very good proposal. So you have to write exact numbers. You have, if you can find data on it, you can write about the exact complications of COVID and how many people have had pneumonia, what percentage of people have had myositis, what percentage of people have had diarrhea, and you can proceed like that. So think like a detective at every point. Go into the nitty gritty of everything you are doing. You're going to have to write your proposal once, twice, thrice. It's going to go on till you refine it, till the point that you don't see any more refinement needed. Now take a look at these topics for a second. These are four things I want you to understand when you write your title and when you see a title. So as a practice, what you can do is pick up some research papers and try to see these four things in their titles. Does it predict content? Is it interesting? Is it concise? And does it have important keywords? Okay, let's start with the first one. Do you think this topic, the first one, it predicts the content? Benefits of meditation for nursing profession, a quantitative investigation done on 200 nurses of the UK. So yes, Asmat is saying it predicts the content. So yeah, we can pick the fact that it predicts content. Does the title seem interesting? Okay. So Nisar says the title doesn't look very interesting. All right, let's. Is it concise? Yes, it's long. All right. And the last point, what is, do you see important keywords? Yes, so we have keywords like meditation, nursing, quantitative investigation, UK hospital. So these are all keywords in the title. So this is how we would judge this title. Okay, let's judge number 3, meditation gurus. Does this predict the content? Yes, it's too short to predict the content now. Do you think this looks interesting? Okay, so, okay, wait. We have a no for interesting also. And Mariam Sayed says yes. Okay, Ghulam Murtza. So we have more votes for no here. Okay, and some people are saying yes as well. So, all right, I've put both the points here. Okay, is it concise? That we have to give it. It's very concise. However, does it have the keywords? No. So, yeah, it doesn't have the keywords. All right. Then we have the last one, Nurses on the Move, a quantitative report on how meditation can improve nursing performance. Does this predict the content? Is it interesting? So yeah, it predicts the content. Everybody's saying so. Okay, some people think it's interesting. Is it concise? It's not very long, but you can't say it's very concise. So yeah, we will put a no here. Does it address the important keywords? Okay. So thank you very much for being awake and being involved in this activity. Now, if you look at this grid yourself, you can see by the number of crosses which titles we will reject. So the first title is predicting content. but it's not interesting, it's not concise at all. It has important keywords. So we have two crosses here. Let's move on to the third one, that is meditation gurus. Now, meditation gurus is a very small heading, but it does not predict the content. It does not um, interest. It does not interest people mostly, and it does not have important keywords. So the only thing that's happening there is that it is concise. So again, you have three crosses here. So this is not a very good topic for your proposal. Okay. Somehow my screen sharing is gone. Let me just resume. All right. Can you see this again?
Yes, we can, Dr. Komal.
Okay. Okay, so the annotation just disappeared because of the screen sharing, but I hope that you remember what happened. The third topic was the one where we had the most points. We didn't do topic two. So let's discuss topic two also. Why mindful nurses make the best communicators. Now, what do you think? Would it be the second topic or the fourth topic? Does the second topic actually predict the content? Yes, to some level it does. In my opinion, the fourth topic would be better because the fourth topic is telling you that this is a quantitative report on how meditation can improve nurse performance. The second topic is short, but it's slightly vague. See, it just says why mindfulnesses make better communicators. It does not indicate what sort of study this is going to be. So, if we had to choose between these two, I think that the second is also not a wrong option. It could be something we could do, but the fourth seems a little more clear. So, whenever you're choosing a topic, you have to keep in mind these four things, that it predicts the content, it is interesting, it is concise, and it has the important keywords. So second one also, if you notice it carefully, it has some of the important keywords like mindfulness. So it's already saying that mindfulness is a keyword here. And then the second one is communication. In the fourth one, they are specifying it to meditation and nurse performance. And the other keyword you can say is a quantitative report. So I think these two are actually, both of them are good topics. Now it's going to depend on your style of work. It's going to depend on the institution you are in, or for example, if you are doing it in CPSP, if you are doing for your FCPS, they usually prefer detailed topics. They would probably opt for something like this. If you have to go for a research grant or a research proposal in some international organization or in some funding agency, which is not your thesis or dissertation topic, they might actually opt for this one. So you see, it's going to change with where you're working, what is the objective of the proposal, and who's the person who's your audience, who's going to judge it. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind also. But saying that, you have to keep these four things for all of your proposals in your head. All right. So thank you for being engaged in this activity. Let's move ahead. Okay, now because my annotation was on, there are all these lines appearing, and sorry about that. So background in literature review. After you have introduced your topic, your title, and you have put in your abstract, you're going to move on to background and literature review. So how do you do that? First of all, you identify your area of interest, which you've already identified in your topic. Let's just continue with the nurse meditation skills in nurses. Let's suppose that is our area of interest. Now we have to identify a research gap. We will be looking through research papers on how nurses use meditation practices, and we will identify a gap, because you cannot do something which people have already done. That is reinventing the wheel, that has no benefit. If there is a publication already present on something, don't go for that. You have to think of a new topic. Another thing which is a grave mistake which we make very frequently and it's not the best ethical policy to follow, but unfortunately, because Pakistan is a resource intensive country, and because research is actually one of the things which is in the backdrop here, we follow this very frequently, that we will copy a research that has taken place in the West, and we will give this logic that this has not been done before in our context. So this is a weak selection of a topic. This is a weak research gap. If something has not been done in your context, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That is a weak research gap. We usually in medical researches we justify it that this has not been done in our context, and because we have a different genetic makeup, we have a different setting, we have a different social setup. All right, you have a different social setup, you have a different genetic makeup, that is good enough. Try to modify your methodology also to your own context. So make that thing different. Don't copy the exact same work somebody else has done in France just because French people are not like Pakistani people. You're still copying a research. So in purely ethical terms, this is wrong. But it is a practice that you will see very commonly over here. And a practice that might be something even more common in clinical setups, because it is easier to perform the same sort of results and to look at the same sort of parameters in our people when you already have a set framework. So whenever you identify a research gap, lots of researchers are providing this facility by getting much amounts of what people should do. Okay, so that is a topic which is beyond the scope of this exact uh, presentation, which is about literature, about writing your research proposal. But what people should do is, what I genuinely recommend is people should read. They should read widely. They should identify areas of interest. They should identify research gaps. And the more you read, the more your brain opens. जिसको कहते हैं ना कि आपका दिमाग खुलता जाता है जितना आप पढ़ते हैं. The more you understand what are the gaps in a specific study. Okay, what are the things which have not been performed? For example, if you look at the literature for the last 1.5 years, you are going to see multiple studies on COVID, repeated studies on COVID, the same thing again and again and again and again. There are so many studies related to medical education, related to public health, related to physiology, which are all repeating the same thing in the novel coronavirus. Despite the fact that the coronavirus is novel, it is something on which you can explore anything right now. It is new. It is something the world has not seen before. But we are repeating the same thing again and again. Instead of that, if you develop a proper literature review study strategy, you will be able to identify research gap, and you will be able to actually not do things which people have done before. Now, what you have to do is that once you identify a research gap, you have to justify how you fill that gap. This is probably the most important thing. That you have to develop a justification or a methodology to how you can fill that research gap. So, like I said before, do not reinvent the wheel. Don't do something which everybody else has done before. Try to do something new, something original, something, even if it's on a smaller scale, try to do something that you can actually work with, which you can call novel. Research is tedious, it is long, it is something which you spend long hours on, something which you spend your money on, something which you spend your very valuable time on. So there's no point in repeating somebody else's work. Try to do something that is your own. Do not reinvent the wheel. Stand on top of it and take pictures as you do something original. This is just a cartoon, but I hope the message hits through. Now, when we are doing literature review, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence that you will see. So there will be a lot of studies, a lot of things, a lot of literature which will not be contributing very valuably to your work. So you have to understand there is a pyramid of the levels of evidence. You have to understand what sort of literature you should be looking at, how much of that literature should be from a certain level of the pyramid, and then how will it contribute. The highest level of the pyramids are meta-analysis and clinical guidelines. Okay, so there's a question: literature review counts under being an author, and maximum how many studies should a research should review in order to write one? All right. So that depends completely on what sort of a research you are doing. If you are doing a PhD thesis, you don't really have a count to how much research you will be studying. So keep on going through your literature as much as you can find. You might have some restrictions given to you by your regulatory authority. For example, you might not be able to look at literature from the past, after, earlier than the past 10 years. So try to find everything relevant you can in those past 10 years. If you are writing a grant for some small short-term project, like a 2 month project or a 3 month project, you might have to just review like 10-15 papers which are relevant to that. That is a very small project, it's a very targeted project, so you don't have to go through a lot of detailed literature review. If you're writing your dissertation or thesis, obviously you will have to go through much more. So it depends on what you are doing. On average, in a publication or a article, a research article, a research paper, you have about 25 to 30 papers which you have reviewed. If you are doing a review article, so the average is 60 to 100 papers which you review. But right now we're talking about research proposals. So these are actually things which you are proposing that you are going to research on. So obviously, it depends on your strength and how much you can actually search. Out of all the literature you study, you're going to discard a lot of it. So we can't say as to how many articles you will be going through. Yes, you might be accepting about 10 to 15 of those articles as being logical or relevant, but you might have to go through a lot more. Now, when you are going through them, these are the pyramidal stages that you should follow. Clinical practice guidelines, this is for health sciences and particularly clinical side, that clinical practice guidelines and meta-analysis and systemic reviews are the highest level of evidence. They are highest level of evidence because they are already pre-appraised. They are actually suggesting findings of hundreds of already filtered studies. So the best practices which were found in already conducted studies and already done literature, they are in your clinical practice and meta-analysis guidelines. So it's a good idea to start from there. Instead of going through all those 50 studies individually, if you can get a strong meta-analysis review and a strong clinical practice guideline, it will save you some time. Okay. After that, you move on to your randomized control trial. So because the randomized control trial is highest level of experimentation, as you have randomization and you have double-blinded studies usually, so it has a very good predictive value. So again, they're at a higher level of evidence. Then you have, after that, moving down, cohort studies, case control studies, case reports, and finally, at the lowest level in our context are the animal and lab studies, because they are not involved with humans, and because they don't have any robust what can we say about this, they don't have any robust design which you can relate to humans. However, you will find that in certain fields, for example, in my field, my basic field is physiology, a lot of things we have to actually study from animal and lab studies, because you cannot do a lot of the experiments on humans directly. A lot of things in physiology, because it takes a long time, it's a study of normal human body function, it has to be approved through a lot of tedious work to go into a meta-analysis or randomized control trial. So we have to look up at lab studies and in vitro cell generation and those things as supportive documents. However, if you're doing a public health study, I think you're better off if you look at the higher levels of evidence first. So animal and lab studies will probably not be suited for you. Similarly, if you're in social sciences, or if your studies related to qualitative studies, you will be better off looking at all of these in the same order. But number 4 and 5, that is case reports and narrative reviews, will be pertinent to you as compared to people who are doing completely clinical studies. For them, the first 2 3 levels are more pertinent. So again, you will choose your literature according to your topic. Once you have gathered the different papers you want to study, the different things you want to do, you're going to have so much information that it's going to be difficult for you to synthesize your purpose out of it or what you want to do. So what I do is, and what I recommend other people to do also, is use a literature review metrics. It is something which makes your life easier. It is basically a table in which you put all of your review of literature. Now, some people do this just with the topics that they find useful, they put them. What I do is that I generally, if I'm doing review of literature of any one subject, I will put all of the articles I find into this table, and then the ones which I have to discard, I will highlight them in red. The ones which I think are top priority, I will put them in green. And the ones which I'm confused about or which I think that I may use at some time, I usually do that table in yellow or purple or some other color. So this is how you divide the table. You can make this easily in Excel or Word, whichever is your preference. Put the author date first. Put the theoretical conceptual framework if you are doing medical education or qualitative study. All right. If this is a quantitative study, you can put the hypothesis here. All right. Then you can have the research question in the next if it is separate. Again, if this is a quantitative study, the hypothesis will just cover both of these. Then you have the methodology. You can give the analysis and results. You can give the conclusions. If there are any implications they've given for future research, you can add them. If there are any limitations they've given, you can make a box here and add them. I usually add a box of limitations. And if there are any implications for practice. So this is important for clinical practice. It can also be important for teaching. So if there's any implication for clinical practice or teaching, you can put them in this box. All right. Now make it as brief as possible. Just put key points over here. What this will help you in doing is that it will help you remember the different articles you studied. It will keep them in one place. It would also assist you when you lose those articles, because if you ever have done a literature review for your dissertations, there are hundreds of articles and they are spread throughout your folders. You don't remember which one is which. So the best rule of thumb is that whatever you're writing here as author date, label your PDF with the same name. So once you open this table, you can simply search in your computer and you can open that PDF too. So whatever detail is required for your study from there, you can actually get it. So once you structure your literature review like this, it becomes very much easier for you to actually understand the gaps that are present in this literature review, understand how you can proceed further, what are the new things. If you want, you can add a gap analysis at the end also. You can add a column for gaps. So you can personalize this into whatever way you like. All right. Because my studies usually focus either they are of medical education or they are of physiology. So there are two different fields. When I have to do quantitative studies, that is physiological studies, I add columns of lab tests, methodology, focus of research, limitations, lab environment, as much detail as I want. When I have to do for medical education, I put things like what worked in the classroom, what didn't work, implications for teaching, practical aspects, gaps in the study. So depending on the amount of time I have and the amount of research I'm doing, I tend to make this table bigger or smaller as I feel. So the same thing I would suggest to you, that personalize it as much as you want. Okay. So this is about your literature review and your background. Once you've added the literature review in this way, you can actually structure it into your writing. So the topics which you have identified are important, the papers you've identified important from here, you will put them in your writing and you will say that these are the papers, these are the findings which we deemed interesting. This is the gap. And this is how we plan on filling that gap. Okay. After the literature review comes the main important thing that everybody looks for in your proposal. It is your study design. So again, like I told you in the beginning, question yourself like a detective. In the study design, start with who, what, where, when, and how. So obviously, who will be the sample size, the people that you are working on, whether it is heart patients, or it is malaria infected patients, or it is blind people, or whatever the sample you have. You will obviously have an inclusion exclusion criteria. You cannot include everybody under the sun. So you have to have a robust inclusion criteria. What is the age group? Why is this age group included? What diseases you are excluding? What diseases are allowed in this age group? Similarly, you have to have a robust exclusion criteria, that why are you not including a certain people? Why are certain diseases not included? Why are certain cohorts not included? If this is an ethnography, why are certain nationalities not included? So it depends completely on who you are actually doing this with. Then you have what? In what you have to write the study design, whether it is qualitative or it is quantitative, okay, and how you're going to proceed further. Then where? So where will include your study location, the study setting, whether this is a lab work, whether this is an OPD based research, whether this is operation theater based research, whether this is ward based research, whether this is a teaching classroom based research, it is an assessment cell. So wherever your setting is, when is going to give you your timeline. That is from the start to the end. So if I'm starting a research in May 2021, my aim should be to finish this research. If it's my, let's say it's my thesis project, so I want to finish this by May 2023. So if it's an MPhil thesis project, it's going to be for 2 years, for which I will make a timeline. I will outline every month, or I will outline every year if it's a longer project, if it's a research grant for 3 years, or if it's a PhD study, I can outline it in years. If I want to make it very, very specific, if it's a short project, I can outline it in weeks also. So in that way, you're going to be making your timelines. And then there's how. In how, you're obviously going to put, obviously in what you have put your methodology, in how you will be having your methodology in detail. Then you will be having important practical aspects like how much money do you have for this? What are the materials that you have? What are the materials that you need to purchase? Where are you going to purchase them? How are you going to get them? Then the ethical approval. So it's very, very important in any research that before you proceed, you have to make sure that this is ethically sensible. Particularly in patient interactions, particularly in human interactions, you have to make sure that your research covers the ERB requirements. Usually we follow the Declaration of Helsinki. It is available online. It has 11 components. You can go through all of them and you can see whether your research proposal is satisfying them. Otherwise, every institute has their own ERB. They have a set of rules. You can get them from your workplace or your institute or your educational sector body, wherever you study. And you have to make sure that your research is satisfying ethically. So in ethical improvement approval, the important things are consent, that your participants all know what's going to happen to them and they are all willingly getting it done. Um, there is disclosure, that if you are working with some pharmaceutical company, your participants need to know that also. They need to understand the stakes that are there here. If it is a clinical trial, they need to understand any possible side effects. Apart from that, there is obviously I told you about consent, I told you about disclosure. You have to tell them about the procedure in detail. If it is, for example, let's say it's a clinical trial about vaccinations, you have to tell them what you will be doing to them, what will be the temperature in the room, where will you be administering the injection, what exact composition is in that injection, what is expected to happen within the next 30 to 40 minutes, what is expected to happen the next day, will the arm be sore, will there be temperature, will there be fever. You have to give a complete disclosure of everything possible under the sun in your study. So that is only how it will be approved ethically. Okay, so this is an example of a Gantt chart. This is a general example showing what things we expect in a Gantt chart. So this is showing it in months. You can see that from September to February, there's a literature review planned. Then there's review of methodology for 2 months, that is September and October. Then there's submission of proposal in October, defense in November, conducting the experiment in December, January, analyzing the results in February, March, and finally submitting the thesis in April. So you can easily make a chart like this in Excel and you can define your timelines, that you will take this much time for topic selection, then you will take these many months for literature review, these many months to develop the methodology, these many months to conduct the research. So making a Gantt chart makes you look professional. It makes you look like a researcher. It gives you a proper insight into how much time you're going to have to put into your work. So when you present a proposal with a Gantt chart, the person who is the examiner, he can clearly see that, okay, this person has planned everything out and this is the amount of time he will do this work in. But you have to be careful that this is just not given to them for show purposes. You have to meet these deadlines. So your Gantt chart has to be very practical. It has to be very real. Okay. Coming to wrapping all of this together, these are the main things that you will have to see in your research. The first thing will be your research question. This will be addressed in your introduction. I told you about the what, why, and how, and this will be sort of a summary of the proposal. Then you will do literature review. In the literature review, we will find the gap. We will look for any arguments for it, against it. You will basically be explaining the why and how of your research. Then you will move on to the methodology. Here you will discuss the research design, whether this is a case cohort study, whether this is um, a randomized control trial, whether this is a double-blinded trial, it's a single-blinded trial, what type of data you have, whether it is qualitative, whether it is quantitative, what are your funding uh, expectations, what are the costs, what are your ethics statements, what is your selection criteria, how will you assess the patient. All of this will come in your methodology. Then you will have your preliminary data which you will analyze. So you will have the findings. You will say that this is the way I intend to analyze it. If it is qualitative, you can thematically analyze it. If it is quantitative, depending on what test or what thing you want to do, you can just take percentages, frequencies. You can go to more advanced tests like ANOVA, MANOVA, MANCOVA, whatever data analysis is dependent on this test. So Dr. Sadia, I think, discussed the different types of data and analysis in the previous lecture with you. So I'm not going to touch that more. Then very importantly, you have to give a statement of your limitations. We are not perfect. We are not superhuman. Our researchers are not perfect. They have loops, they have gaps, um, they have weaknesses. So you have to say the limitations you had in your study. And if you can do any alternative, you should suggest that also. For example, if you have a study on COVID-19 effects on the lungs. So let's say you're studying about pneumonia patients and you're doing it in a particular tertiary care hospital which is accessible to you. So first limitation will be that you're only looking at one clinical setup. All right. You're not looking at the whole country, you're not looking at the whole world. So this is your first limitation. The second limitation will be that maybe you're looking at one particular ward, maybe you're looking at antibiotics according to the standard treatment protocol in your setup. Maybe the antibiotic administered there is different from the antibiotic being administered in some other place. Maybe you didn't have enough medical facilities in that hospital. So all of these things are going to be your weaknesses or your limitations. And your research has to address them, and it has to give alternatives as to how this can be improved by you or by others in further studies. Okay. And finally, in the conclusion, you're going to give your findings, whatever findings you have, the importance of your work, that why will this research, if it is continued at a larger scale, be important, the contributions of the people involved, that is apart from you, all the other co-authors, all of your supervisors, all of your lab staff, all of your nurses. Ethically, you should actually give credit to all of the contributions. Okay. So this is how you end a proposal. So again, I'm going to say this one more time, that you should always know your limitations. So just because you can hold your breath underwater doesn't mean you can live there. So every research will have limitations. You have to try to minimize them, but you have to give the ones which are present. You cannot portray your work as perfect. Next thing which we want to touch upon are, once you've made your proposal, this is about funding and grants. So it's very important that when you have a research proposal, you know about the different avenues where you can get funded from. If you are an MPhil or a PhD student, you are eligible to be funded from the Higher Education Commission. You're also eligible to be funded for grants from external NGOs, external bodies, from the Pakistan Science Foundation. So keep a lookout on the internet as well as on the Higher Education Commission website for the different grants and the scholarships that you may be able to avail. Because research is expensive, if you can get monetary facilitation, nothing like it. Now, how to work for grants? When you are writing a proposal that is specifically targeting a specific organization like the HEC, so that you want to take money from them, first thing, learn more about the funding agency. Read their website, read their goals, align your work with their goals. All right, understand your target audience, understand if you are a health sciences student, let's say you are a master's of public health student. So understand the examiners and the target audience in the Higher Education Commission who will be reading your draft. Are they all related to health sciences? Most likely not. So you have to make your draft in a way that a layman will understand what you're trying to do, but you will also include in it your technical scientific explanations. Okay? Go through the funders guidelines for proposals. Now, this is something which is very, very important. I think I did not stress on this before. Whatever guidelines you are given, you have to follow them. We make a mistake. I've made this mistake multiple times, and I've seen other people, my class fellows who did their clinical side, who did their FCPS, they also had the same issues. What we do is that we keep on following the same pattern of research that we did in community medicine in undergraduate, or that we followed in some of our own articles. That's not the way it is. You have to change your methodology of writing. You have to change your referencing style. You have to change everything according to the to the guidelines given to you. That is the first thing they will see. If your university gives you thesis guidelines and your headings are not according to the font that they've given you, or you are not left justified, or your margins are not according to the sizes, they are not going to see the rest of it. They're just going to see the format and say that this person was casual enough to not follow a simple format. So no matter how gold standard your work is, when you cannot follow their pattern, they don't care. So you have to follow through the guidelines as much as possible. Make a list of everything you need to do, the font size, the questions you need to you need to address, the section headings you need to have, the supporting documents you need to submit. This is completely true for funding agencies also. If you've ever supported it, if you've ever given an HEC grant, or you've ever applied for one, you will notice on the website they have a list for every grant. So you have to make that list and keep it with yourself and fulfill it as much as possible. Do not be casual about this at all. Now, once you have surveyed the things you need to achieve that grant, what are you going to tell them? What are the things you need to write in your proposal in a way to ask for money for funding it? You have to give your usefulness for scientific development. You have to sell your proposal basically. You have to tell them how it is practically useful, how it can be implemented, how it will change your field and the wider world. You will have to say how it is widely replicable, how it can be applied in different contexts. You have to give a little personal aspect as to what motivated you to choose the topic. Then you have to stress on the team you have. So grants are usually written for research projects. So you will usually have a team of researchers. So you have to express the expertise and experience of all the researchers who are part of your study. You have to tell them how your work is aligned with their mission and vision, because obviously you're taking their money. So you have to make your work look like it is aligned with their vision. You have to give them reasons to believe that your work is going to be beneficial for their mission and vision also. Then you have to give the details about how your institute is supporting you. So don't try to extract all money from one source. Explain to them that these are the areas which are deficient, these are the areas where my institution lacks, and these are the areas which we need support in. Don't try to make a fool of them by giving them false quotations about things which you already have in your institute. So funding agencies, they're very clever and they're very transparent, and they expect you to be transparent. So don't lie at any level. For example, if you have printers present all over your institution, you're studying in a university, it's understood that you're going to have printers, you're going to have computers, you're going to have setups. If you ask for printers in your grant, that will be lying. uh, for example, like if you have a physiology research, you have iodine. It's just a common chemical, it's a very cheap chemical, it's present in every lab. Now if I put iodine requisitions in my funding, they will probably think that I'm just trying to extract money uselessly, because iodine is usually present in most labs. However, if I ask for a specific kind of sulfuric acid, a specific concentration, or if I ask for some specific kind of electron microscope which does photography, obviously those things are rare. So the funding agency may arrange it for me in some other area, or they may arrange for one such object to be bought for the whole university. All right, now you have to tell them all the problems you have identified in your study, and then you have to tell them the solutions which you have. Okay, and finally you have to do the resources you need you have to give them the resources list that you need to plan and to use your study. Okay, so be careful about all of these things when you are planning your research grant, or you are making a proposal for a grant. Okay, now summarizing everything that is supposed to be part of your research proposal. First things first, you have to have an aim. So what is your proposal about? What is it that you're addressing? Then you go to the background and literature review. What do we already know? What are the things we already know about this COVID-19, let's suppose? What are the things that have already been studied? Then you will write your research questions, which will talk about with what do we need to find out. Okay, so what do we need to find out? What do we need to discover? All right. Okay, then you will go to methodology. In methodology, you will see how you will answer the research question. Finally, you will find the resources. In the resources, you will include your grant, you will include everything else. Then you will include your ethics. Okay, is the research socially acceptable? Is this research something that can be approved? Finally, you will go to your outcomes, that what will be the benefits of this particular research. Okay, so in the methodology, there are some things that I would just talk about methodology now. Don't bite off more than you can chew. This means that do not over exceed or do complicated tests which will not be possible for you to perform in the given time, which will not be possible for you to perform in your given labs, and which you don't have the technical expertise for. If you don't know how to perform an advanced level ELISA or a double PCR, don't go for it. Or if you have to go for it, and enroll someone with you who knows how to. Yes, my children keep on making appearances in the lecture, so I'm sorry about that. All right. So again, be very, very sensible. Set smart goals. You have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. You want your study to finish. You don't want it to be till the end of time. This is not a study that's going to continue till doomsday. So you will have, particularly if you want a grant, grants are time-based. They will only give you a grant for 1 year or 2 years. If you exceed your study, उस ग्रांट के बाद का जितना भी टाइम आप लेंगे उसका पैसा आपका खुद का है. आपको वो सारे केमिकल्स खुद खरीदने पड़ेंगे, आपको वो सारी चीजें खुद करनी पड़ेगी. तो इसलिए सोच समझ के अपना वक्त लगाइए. उसमें ये देखिए कि क्या ये चीज आप कर सकते हैं. कैन यू डू दिस? इज दिस प्रैक्टिकल? Don't go for complicated or very tedious measures just because they sound cool or they sound very different or they sound very new. Think practically, think sensibly. Keep calm. You're not Superman. You cannot do everything. So be very, very careful about this, and always think about the money. The money is essential. The money is the one thing that is going to make your research go ahead. It is the one thing which you will be needing to fuel your research. So think about ways in which you can utilize money sensibly. It's exhaustible. It's an exhaustible source. You're not going to have unlimited resources for your research work. So while making a methodology, think about all of these things. Okay, the last thing is plagiarism. Now, why do we need to do plagiarism? Why do we need to do referencing? To avoid plagiarism, to credit the author, to show the original source, to demonstrate your knowledge, and to lend credibility to your work. If you don't have references, it is just word of your mouth. It is not a research. So you have to put references everywhere. HEC gives you a 19% mark, that above 19% do not plagiarize. So below 19%, if you have copied from somewhere, that is fine. But above 19%, please don't go ahead of that. Okay. Yes, Asif Saab is right. Our government does have issues with this. But if you see the new grants for HEC, they're very practical and they're very, very transparent. They're trying to give money to researchers where it's worth. It's going to become very competitive, and they're trying to use it honestly. And I don't know about the exact government agenda because I don't speak for them, but the Prime Minister has also started developing a new research and development fund for every institute. So let's hope things get better with that. Okay, something very practical I want to tell you about references. Whatever referencing software you are using, please make sure that you are having complete command on it, whether it is Mendeley, whether it is EndNote, and that you know the exact referencing criteria for your journal, for your university, for whichever granting body you're sending it to. Sometimes when you use a pre-made software, like when you use Mendeley, and you have Vancouver's style, let's suppose as an example, overthrow the Vancouver style that your journal is asking or that your university is asking. There may be a difference in edition. There may be a slight difference in the standard Mendeley way of writing. So in the standard Mendeley way of writing, you have to put in DOIs. Some institutes don't ask for DOIs; they ask you to delete those. So you will have to manually edit all of that beforehand. If you do it after you've referenced everything, it's going to take you ages to revise everything again. Secondly, a very practical step that if you are more than one person in the grant, try to use the same research managing referencing manager. If one of you is using Mendeley and the other one is using EndNote, there will be complications because when both of you are co-editing, sometimes EndNote doesn't edit Mendeley reference things. It actually changes it to standard EndNote files. So I had this experience with the last research I was working on. I had to completely shift everything because I use Mendeley and my co-researcher was using EndNote. So when I was editing the file, Mendeley standardized all of the EndNote format and it changed all of the references to its own style. And when I would send it to him, it would again change because he was using EndNote. So I had to actually disable my Mendeley and I had to manually edit all of the references again. So that was a tedious step for me. I didn't know that when you're working with other people, these sort of things come up. So it's actually suggested that all of you use the same reference software. And if you don't use the same one, then be prepared to disable yours or to ask them to disable theirs. So whichever one of you is actually looking after the references, they should not get it complicated. All right. I hope this lecture was somewhat valuable to you. I've tried to put as many practical things as I can. I didn't share a lot of theory with you. So thank you very much. If you have any queries, we could go there now. Okay, so if there's any questions, I'm open to questions now. So either everyone has gotten everything or you have not understood anything at all. So those are the two things I can make out now. Thank you very much, Asif Saab. Thank you. What is the ideal time for Terry for research? You're in MBBS. Are you asking like just for an undergraduate project? That what is the ideal time for research? Okay, so that depends on the type of project you are doing. If, for example, you're doing a survey-based project, you can actually get it done in 4 to 6 months. Like if you're trying to find perceptions of, uh, let's see, perceptions of students about problem-based learning, you can get that done in 5 to 6 months. If you are trying to compare problem-based learning and case-based learning as effective methods of study, you will probably have to do that for a whole semester or for 2 semesters. So you have to take that to 1 year. If you are trying to invent new criteria for problem-based learning in, let's say, physiology, so that might go up to a year. Do you understand? This might go as long. There's no ideal time. It's the amount of time that your work requires, that your objectives require. Which agency gives funds more readily? Actually, none of them do. They're all very competitive now. But I think that you have a better shot with the Higher Education Commission because in Pakistan, they might actually support students more. Whereas the other agencies here, like the Pakistan Science Foundation, they have a limited number of funds, and foreign agencies are now quite skeptical for us. But it's worth a shot. Try to apply as many places as possible. You might get lucky with one of them. Okay, proposal word limit, how much generally? So it's about, it depends on different formats. For grants, it's usually about 2,000 to 3,000 words. For if you're writing a research proposal as a synopsis, it's usually around 1,500 to 2,500 words. They do specify it. You will have a specification for every type of proposal you have. All right. Anything else? Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Komal. I think the
Thank you so
participants have
much.
understood really well, and this was a very engaging and a very useful session. So
Thank
we're
you
all
so much.
thankful to your wonderful style of delivery. And if you would like to conclude the session.
Thank you so much. I had a great time. The audience was lovely and was very engaging. And I think now it's getting late also, so we just concluded. And hopefully, you will all be having had some sort of knowledge or some sort of information from this session. It was lovely to be here. Thank you, Dr. Munir, and thank you to the LUMHS Research Forum for having me. I'd be leaving now. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Laugh, Dr. Komal. Thank you very much.
Okay.